Let me take a quick survey. 3 questions. How many of you today would self-identify as a strange person? Strange, abnormal, not your regular cat. You know, how many would you say, I think I'm strange and I'm proud of it? In fact, okay. Now let me ask you another question. How many of you have met somebody today after having spoken or maybe eaten with them over at lunch, you back away from it and you go, my God, I thought I was strange. How many of you thought you met somebody strange today, different than you? Okay. And then finally, because this is a Midwest audience for the most part, how many of you, in your heart of hearts, know that should people really know what you are like, would definitely put you in the strange category, but you're just too good at hiding it? Anybody? How many? The secretly strange among us. Today I want to talk to you about the positive power of strange. Now, we're talking about the space between, and normally the space between is enlarged by strange. It is a natural human response to the non-normative. That is, we back away from it. We make the space greater. But I believe there's a positive power in being strange. And not only is there a positive power in being strange, there's an absolute need in our time for us to embrace our strangeness and the strangeness of others in a way that perhaps we never have. The research is there. It's not hard to find. You and I are living in a world where the complexity of the problems we face is growing and growing. It's getting bigger and bigger. And what that means is that our ability to solve these problems is changing. Now, historically, when we solve problems, lots of us have been trained to look for the lone genius, that smart person that's going to come in on the white horse and rescue us, right? But the evidence is different than that. In fact, if you think about the problems that have been solved, those problems have all been cherry-picked. The low-hanging fruit's been taken. What's left is problems that have to be solved by people like you and me coming together. And that means strange meeting strange and forming teams. One interesting piece of research that I recently came across is that of Ben Jones from the Kellogg School of Business. What he's done is he's looked at over 20 million peer-reviewed papers and over 2 million patents over the last 50 years. And as he's analyzed these, he's seen a shift. He saw a shift from individuals submitting papers and individuals submitting patents to teams submitting patents and peer-reviewed papers. In fact, he notes this. He says, when it comes to home run papers, that is, papers that have over 1,000 citations by others reading them and approving of what's being said, home run papers are now, this wasn't always true, but now 6 times more likely to have been written by a team of people, not just by one individual. So here's the deal. If we're going to figure out what we need to figure out, if we're going to change our world, if we're going to advance things, then your strangeness has to somehow link up with my strangeness. And we have to somehow have the positive power of strangeness that's actually going to close the gap between us rather than enlarge it. Now, meeting another strange person can be rather awkward. Understand that, right? I like to poke at my background. I was raised German Lutheran, you know. We're not really sure we like people. And so we often kind of keep our distance. But even if you're like another person, you're going to find it's hard to kind of reach out to them. I mean, you're not that different, but still, it's awkward, right? Closing the gap can't always be easy. So let me give you a little bit of insight as to how you and I can maybe close that gap. First of all, let me tell you a story. I want you to show you how you can do this. And one of the things you need to keep in mind is that you have to experiment with your strangeness. Because if you let it all out at once, right? If you let it all out at once, you're just going to send people running. So last year, I'm getting on a flight for Memphis. And I'm going through the normal routine. Many of us have been through it. I have my boarding pass. I have my driver's license. I'm standing before the desk of the TSA person, and I'm about ready to board. And so I'm going to bring my boarding pass and my driver's license. And I step up, and I'm doing an experiment on strangeness and its power to attract. And here's what I do. They ask for the boarding pass and ID, and I give it to this person, the TSA official. And out of pleasantness and out of predictability, that person says to me, "How are you?" And I thought, it's time to experiment with strangeness. And so I said, "I'm full of Johnny Cash." I don't recommend everyone do this. It's not something for the amateur, but over time you'll learn how to let your strangeness out. I felt I could do this and not be frisked later. And so I said, "I'm full of Johnny Cash." And the TSA person, she looked back up at me because I broke her routine. And she said to me, "I'm full of the Temptations." And I said, "Do you know Papa was a Rolling Stone?" And she said, "Wherever he laid his hat was his home." To which I said, "And when he left us," and together we said, "He left us alone." I made a friend. Now, strangeness, well worked, can actually bring you together. Letting it out in incremental, metered, and intelligent ways can allow us to kind of make connections and close the distance between us that we would not expect to be able to do. Why does that work? Well, part of it is to do with your brain. I know a lot of you would think metaphorically this represents you. You're a bright bulb. It doesn't. What we know from scientific research on our brains is that you're more like this. Yes. Every one of us. So it's not an elitist issue. Every one of us is really a dim bulb. What it turns out is that every one of us has about 40 watts of energy to work with in terms of our brain power. And so energy consumption and where we're going to spend our time and attention is always an issue for our brain. And our brain has come up with a strategy to minimize energy consumption. The brain says to itself, "I'm going to ignore stuff I've seen before. I'm going to ignore predictability. I'm going to ignore the conventional. And I'm going to save myself from them big moments when the guy comes up and he says, 'I'm full of Johnny Cash.' That's when I'm going to work. That's when I'm going to work." I call it the crap filter. Because that's how we navigate life. That's how we get rid of our mail. Crap, right? We abandon it. We have 40 watts of energy to work with, and what we really respond to is that difference in that other person in that moment. It wakes us up. One of my favorite books is written by an economist and a neuroscientist. One person, but both of those things. His name is Gregory Burns. He wrote a book called Iconoclast. He has this great line. He says, "Your brain is a lazy piece of meat. It must be shocked into paying attention." And so if we can be selectively strange with other people, if we learn how to kind of step in and stir things up, if we zig when others zag, if we learn how to do that, we can close the gap between us. And I want to challenge you to experiment with what makes you different in your social settings, your context that you find yourself in your workplaces. A little strange out. What could it hurt? Maybe you'll make a new friend. But then I want to say, take it to the next level, men and women. Let's take it to the level where, you actually reach out to the strange. You know who they are. You've commented on them at the dinner table. about the fellow worker. You've seen them in their cars, singing away, doing something weird. You know who they are. And what I'm going to say is that when it comes to reaching out to the strange, it's absolutely crucial. Something Lee said earlier about weird cities. We know that density speeds things up. And one of the things that speeds things up in is that when we are really together and we really can't avoid each other, our creativity goes up. Our problem-solving ability goes up. And so the more we are packed together, the more we are touching one another, the better it is. It's one of the reasons Jane Jacobs, who studied cities, said something like this. She said, by its nature, the metropolis provides what otherwise could only be given by traveling. And what is it that it provides? Namely, the strange. Here's the downside for you and me. We live in Iowa. So how will you find enough strange people to stimulate your creativity, to form teams so that we can solve the problems we need? This is what we're facing. It's just too easy to avoid the weirdos in our life. It's just too easy. You could go to New York City 20 times a year and swim in the sea of strangeness, but so what? That really doesn't help you here. Now, there are a number of things that people do. Up at St. Paul, a company called 3M. Amazing company. Started making sandpaper, then tape, and then, sticky notes, everything you can imagine. 3M makes 55,000 products these days. 55,000 products. That's almost a 1-to-1 ratio for all of their employees. You want to know how they do it? They do it by ticking their employees off. And here's how they tick them off. They have a thing called forced rotations. And forced rotation says that once you're on a team and you're working on a problem, it's our goal to move you off of that team every 4 to 6 years and force you to be on a team you don't know anybody on, to kind of bring together like the glue specialist with the optical specialist. We force this to happen. And I can't make you do it. God knows I wish I could. Because I work with a lot of creative teams that just can't create because they can't get the craziness to show up. And so forced rotations probably won't work. Or you think of somebody like Steve Jobs and how he designed Pixar Studios. You know the story of Pixar Studios, the old Del Monte canning factory north of Oakland, California. And Jobs insisted that people run into each other all the time. And so the atrium is in the middle of this 5,000-person facility. And so the bookstore's in the middle, and the cafeteria's in the middle, and the gear store's in the middle, and the coffee shop's in the middle. And that wasn't enough for Steve Jobs. What did he do? He put the bathrooms in the middle. And so freaking people have to walk 5 minutes just to go to the can. But they interact. They can't avoid each other. That's great. City planners, any city planners here? Here's what I'm offering. I think that what we should do is put all public restrooms on the border between the suburbs and the city. I think that's how we begin to pull together as a community. With me? Too weird, right? Yeah. Sometimes even an experienced, strange experimenter like me makes a mistake. The trouble is that you and I live in a world where it's easy to make our own little echo chambers. It's really easy. It's easy for us to make sure we never encounter somebody that we don't know, with an opinion that we don't like, that thinks and acts differently than who we are. Easy to do. TED is a great place where you can't do that, but most of the time we're out there and we don't have to hang with people like this, because we can hang with people like this, or vice versa. We don't have to hang with these cats. We can go with these cats. When it comes to the really important things, who wants to be with these people? Who wants to be with these people? Who wants to be with these people? We live in an echo chamber. I'm saying, come on, let's meet some really strange people. Step up. Make it happen. So I'm riding a bus. I'm riding a bus every day. I'm reading books because I don't want to meet people. And I think this is stupid. And so I said, I'm going to pick out the strangest person on the bus, and I'm going to get to know that person. And the strangest person on the bus is this very elderly, frail woman. She gets on the bus every Tuesday. She gets on the bus so slow. And so I finally get to know her. Her name is Alice Moore. She's 95 years old. She gets on the bus every Tuesday. I get to know her. She tells me about growing up. Her dad was a railroader. She has a twin sister. I get to know her. I reach out to the strangest person I ever met. Wow. And then one day she gets on the bus and she says, Mike, I'm moving to San Francisco so that I can spend the last of my days with my sister. She's 95, I'm 95, with twins. We just think we should be together. And I want you to have my upright piano. And I start to cry. Because I know that her railroader dad worked his butt off to buy his twin daughters an upright piano in 1909. She said, I just think this will help your family. And my kids learned to play piano on Alice Moore's piano. And she said, when you're done with it, give it to some other family that needs it. The technical term for strange is stranger. We can do this. Good things can happen. There's positive power in being strange, even for Midwesterners. I like Johnny Carson. He grew up 40 miles from my hometown. And here he is with James Brown. Yeah, you know, I Feel Good, from South Carolina. This is strange, but it's way cool. And I would say this: we did good like we knew we could. Thanks for listening.